Well, I'm joined now by CEO of MirYam Institute and the host of Opinionated at 1:24 News, and that's Benjamin Anthony, who's joining us now. Benjamin, we've been hearing this morning about what is happening in Tel Aviv, the way that you are reacting to all of the hits that you're receiving from Iran. Can I ask you, what is your strategy? What is your end game here? What do you see happening at the end of this present conflict where you are lobbing missiles at each other? Where does this end for the people who live in Iran, for the people who are desperate for democracy?
Hi, Angela. It's a pleasure to be with you, and thank you for having me. I think that Israel's been very, very clear over a number of years. I don't think there's anything new that's eventuated from our recent conflict with Iran in terms of what our strategy is. We want to ensure that Iran, this regime, never obtains a nuclear weapon. In addition to that, we want to ensure that the threat of the ballistic missile buildup that holds us very firmly within range does not come to reality and is massively downgraded. We're in the midst of doing that work very dutifully, as the previous commentator just expressed. And the third issue is that we need to rid ourselves of this scourge of the Iranian terror proxy network that is right on our borders, including in southern Lebanon, known as Hezbollah, including inside the Gaza Strip, known as Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and is arrayed, frankly, all over the world and elsewhere, and will soon pose, and already does in many cases, a very clear and present threat to Western civilization as we know it. So I think everybody knows, if they've been listening to the Prime Minister, what the Prime Minister wants. I think that he's right to pursue those goals. And I applaud, of course, the pilots and the military of the Israel Defense Forces for moving forward and advancing those in the best and most effective way possible. And I'm thankful and grateful for the partnership and the alliance with the United States of America, something that stands in very stark contrast with the foolishness and ineptitude, if I may say so, of the non-Prime Minister that you have there in the UK, the country of my birth and upbringing, Keir Starmer. The man's statement was appalling, it was dreadful, and I think he continues, unfortunately, to beclown himself with statements where he rushes to say that the UK has no involvement. The man actually makes Neville Chamberlain look positively Churchillian, in my opinion. And it's lamentable that there's such a non-leader in position at such a consequential time as this.
What do you want him to say? What do you want him to do then?
Well, I think I'd like him to grow up a little bit, and I'll explain why. This is a man who sees a phantom state that doesn't exist, the state of Palestine, and recognizes it at the United Nations. This is a man who sees intelligence about the proximity to the man he made ambassador to the United States, Peter Mandelson, to Jeffrey Epstein, a convicted sex offender, and sends him there nonetheless. The state of Palestine that Keir Starmer recognized was about as true and real as Never Neverland, and Keir Starmer is really about as grown up as Peter Pan, the child who vowed to never grow up. So I think I'd like him to see the reality of the fact that when he says, and I'm quoting here, that the Iranian regime poses a direct threat to dissidents and to the Jewish community inside the United Kingdom, he ought to actually do something about that rather than to then go on and say it poses that threat. We've interdicted many terror threats against our own people in our own British shores, but we're not actually going to do anything about it. That's non-leadership, if ever it were to be defined and looked upon.
Well, you've made that very clear indeed. Let me just ask you this. Going back to the beginning of your answer just now, you were saying the two main things that you want out of this present conflict. First of all is to ensure that Iran never has a nuclear weapon. And I think you're quite right that the air defences that you have, the air strike, the air power that you have would be able to take out those locations. But when you talk about getting rid of this terrorist proxy country, that is going to have to come from regime change. What powers, what support do you have to give to the population, to the 91 million people who live in Iran, to enable that to happen? Because there you are talking about regime change. And unless you're prepared to put boots on the ground, clearly that is not going to happen, because if it does not happen, it means you are going to have to go on negotiating with a hard-line Iranian leadership.
Yeah, so thank you for the question. Again, it was three goals. It's the end to the nuclear weapons pursuit of Iran, the end to the ballistic missile threats that Iran is propping up, and of course the end to the terror network that's arrayed throughout the globe and right here along the borders of Israel in at least two cases. So in terms of regime change, look, we have to take a brief glance back in order to understand where we are and why that's become the goal. We had a 12-day war. The 12-day war was brought about in order to bring down the ballistic missile capabilities of Iran. We did that successfully, but they're replenishing it because the regime endured, and also to dramatically degrade the nuclear weapons program, which we did, but they are replenishing that and rejuvenating it because the regime endured. Now, in addition to that, Angela, one of the things that we've managed to do is to massively downgrade the effectiveness of the proxies that Iran has on our borders. Therefore, we have a freer hand to act against the regime because they have less deterrence against us as a result of the enfeebling of their proxies in Lebanon and in Gaza by the Israel Defense Forces. And in addition to that, we've got superiority over the skies of Iran as a consequence of the 12-day war that was undertaken previously by Israel together with the United States of America. Now, when you put all of that together and you realize that no matter how impeded the Iranians are, and you realize no matter how enfeebled their proxies are, they are still going to pursue nuclear weapons, you have to turn your sights towards a different goal, and that goal is regime change. Now, Khamenei has been dispatched. I'm very pleased that he's been dispatched. The dispatching of leaders in ideological jihadist regimes seems merely to spawn the next leader. That's not to decry the importance of doing so. It's a blessed and it's a valuable pursuit that we are undertaking there. But ultimately, Angela, I think that Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump have united behind a very clear line, and that is, we will open the area for you, people of Iran, but you are going to have to stand up and take your country in hand. That's ultimately where this should go. We haven't yet seen the people emerge. It's likely that that's a consequence of the ongoing pounding and bombardment that the Iranian regime is currently absorbing. But I'm hopeful that in time, the people may well rise up and fashion that country into a more preferable form to the one that it's had since the revolution.